We've all seen the story or seen the movie of The Wizard of Oz, the story of a young girl growing up in Kansas. My first roommate at North Central was from Kansas, and he did a speech one time, says, no, Kansas does not turn black and white at the state line. And there's that whole thing. Laura and I were in the process of watching Oscar winners. Realize there's a lot of movies that you hear of, you know about them, but you've really never watched them. So last night started watching Gone with the Wind, and I've never seen the movie. I've seen clips and pieces and parts and all that, but I've never seen the entire movie. But I know that it was being filmed at the same time The Wizard of Oz was, and everybody knows the one unique thing about the movie The Wizard of Oz. Not only is it a fantasy story, but it's also one of the first movies ever to use color in its production. And they had already filmed the beginning, they had already filmed the end, and they kind of actually stalled to see if this would actually is going to work, and having the access to the colorized film. And obviously, one of the greatest things that ever happened in a movie theater was when Dorothy opened that door from a black and white world into broad color on the big screen. I've never seen the movie on a big screen. I've only seen it on a TV. But I could imagine what it was like being in that audience, to see something like just, wow, because we've only seen black and white, and the fullness and the color of that. Well, anyway, the story we know is about Dorothy and her journey. She's bumped on the head, they're in the tornado, and she wakes up in this fantasy land called Oz, and she's trying to get back home, and they tell her she needs to go see the wizard, and tells her to, the little munchkins and everything, they tell her to follow the yellow brick road, and we know that whole thing. And on her journey, she encounters various people. The first one, obviously, is the Scarecrow, and the Scarecrow needed a brain, and she says, well, come with me, maybe the wizard can help you with that. So off they go, and they're singing, they're dancing, and all these things. And the next character they come across is the Tin Man. And the movie portrays the Tin Man a little differently than the actual novel portrayed him. But we know that he's looking for a heart, and then eventually they find the cowardly lion who needs courage, and they go off to Oz, and they do all the things that they need to do, and eventually Dorothy goes home. I want us to back up to that second man today and look at the Tin Man. Pastor's given me this week and next week to preach. I'll just give you that warning up front. How's that? But because we were talking about some things, and I said, I've got something that I said, if the opportunity ever comes up, let me know. And he says, well, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so this is my shot. But in the movie, the Tin Man, Dorothy and the Scarecrow, they find the Tin Man, and he's all rusted up. What the movie doesn't tell us is how he got that way. See, in the novel, the Tin Man was actually a real man. He had fallen in love with a beautiful munchkin, and the witch didn't like it. And so she decided to curse the woodsman. And she decided that, she had to prevent this man who his whole thing was, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to build us a nice home, and then I'm going to marry you, and I'm going to take you out of the Munchkin village, and we're going to live out, live in our house, and all these kinds of things. And the witch did not like it. And so she cursed him to where, as he was doing his job, he was constantly hurting himself. And he cuts off one arm, and he needs that arm replaced, so there's a tinsman who comes and builds him a new arm. And as you read the story, you go through the whole process. As we've seen him in the movies, I've just got a small picture here, but we know that his entire body is replaced with tin. See, the final accident that he had literally caused his body to be cut in half. And the tinsman was able to replace his body, but he forgot one part, his heart. He forgot his heart. And so I want to read this to you here just a little bit. He's describing a story to Dorothy and the Scarecrow. He says, I thought I had beaten the wicked witch then, and I worked harder than ever. But little did I know how cruel the enemy could be. She thought of a new way to kill my love for the beautiful Munchkin maiden. It made my axe slip again so that it cut right through my body, splitting it into two halves. Once more the tinner came to my help and made me a body of tin, fastening my 10 arms and legs and head to it by means of joints so that I could move around as well as ever. But alas, I now had no heart, so that I lost all of my love for the Munchkin girl and did not care whether I married or not. My body shone so brightly in the sun that I felt very proud of it and did not matter if my axe slipped, for it would not cut me. There was only one danger. My joints would rust. But I kept an oil can in the cottage and took care to oil myself whenever I needed it. So, however, there came a day when I forgot to do this, and being caught in a rainstorm, before I had thought of the danger of my joints, they had rusted. And I was left to stand in the woods until you came to help me. It was a terrible thing to undergo, but during the year I stood there, I had time to think of the greatest loss I had known was the loss of my heart. While I was in love, I was the happiest man on earth, but no one can love who has no heart. And so I'm resolved to ask Oz to give me one. And if he does, I'll go back to the Munchkin Maiden and marry her. But Dorothy and the Scarecrow had been greatly interested in the story of the Tin Woodsman, and now they knew why he was so anxious to get a new heart. All the same, said the Scarecrow, I shall ask for brains instead of a heart, for a fool would not know what to do with a heart if he had one. I shall take the heart, returned the Woodsman, for brains do not make one happy, and happiness is the best thing in the world. We have a real man here who was stuck for a year like this. At least that's the way we see him in the movie. He's rusted. And he has an entire year to think about his greatest loss. You know, it wasn't his legs. It wasn't his arms. It wasn't even his torso. But his heart. And he knew and he understood through the course of this year of reflecting on this that everything else could be replaced. But without that heart, there really was no purpose and there was no point. And that's what I want us to look at. If you could, go ahead and show that video clip.
In my experience, looking like a Christian turns out to be a pretty easy thing to accomplish. It takes a while to get the hang of, but after a while, it's honestly just like second nature. There's a litany of sorts, a way to talk, a way to dress, which books to read, which issues to care about. I mean, there are even quite a few varieties to choose from. The fundamentalist, the emerger, the socially conscientious, each one with their own hairstyle and pop theologians and Bible translations. I mean, you're really free to express yourself and still look Christian. But the problem is, and don't get me wrong, all these outward things, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. I mean, feel free to support your local discount Christian bookstore, but the problem is that all these things can so exteriorize our faith that we forget what's happening inside us. Our faith becomes so carefully groomed and stylized that we let those outward things, the politics and the book of the week and the newest cause or the latest, greatest worship album, we let them numb us from ourselves. And one day we're sitting there thinking, you know, I'm getting pretty good at this Christian thing, and we've totally forgotten this mess of a heart that's inside us. And all I'm saying is, nothing that you do for your image is ever going to change your heart. And your heart, that's all God really cares about. I mean, yeah, it's frightening down there, but, you know, don't ignore it. It's dangerous to ignore it. I mean, your heart, that's your eternity.
Over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be talking about the affairs of the heart. This morning, I want us to look at what the real issues are, what the real problems are. And I'm going to use a lot of scripture here in a few minutes, and they're going to try to keep up on the screen as best they can. But the heart is the central component of everything. If we lose our heart, we have a problem. I saw a movie the other day called 7 Pounds. Has anybody seen this movie yet? I wasn't really sure what it was about when we first went to see it. It's a Will Smith movie, and at the end of the movie, he makes himself an organ donor. Is basically what the deal is. And if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to tell you the whole plot. But he eventually gives his heart to a young lady who needs it. You know, you've heard of heart transplants. We've heard of all these different organ transplants. When we were in our church in Cleveland, we had, it made Dateline. It was an entire night, one night on Dateline. We had a couple ladies in our church. We had one lady who desperately needed a kidney transplant, and the church had gone through a 40-day fast, and another lady in the church really felt like God was calling her to donate one of her kidneys. And she approached her with this, and, you know, it was kind of, wow, great, thanks, but, you know, okay, whatever, like, it's never really going to play out. And she really felt, Diane really felt like she was supposed to do this. And so they went on, and they went to the doctors, and the doctor says, well, we can do some tests, but we're not real favorable about this. And they said, well, why is that? And they said, well, you've got one major hurdle you need to overcome. You're not of the same race. And so that will usually create lots of issues. Blood types might match, all these other things might match, but the reality is just the fact that one was Caucasian and one wasn't, that can make just massive, massive problems. So anyway, so they go through this whole thing, and I'll tell you, her two children, they were not happy about this at all. Mom, you're giving up something that if you have a problem with the other one, you're going to die. I mean, this was a huge, huge decision, but felt very much that this was supposed to go on. And so off they went, and, Dateline heard about the whole story. I'm not really sure how they found out about it, but I know they found out about it. They'd come to the church, and, they're just like, this stuff just doesn't happen. I mean, not in this kind of situation. And so anyway, they went through the whole process. They went through the surgery. The surgery took. Matter of fact, the recovery time was nowhere near what it normally was. And all these things, and both ladies to this day are living very normal, very healthy lives, and all these kinds of things. So all those obstacles were overcome. And that was with the kidney. And we know how it is with heart transplants and things. But the heart, without the heart, we're in trouble. Even throughout Scripture, the heart is talked about more than any other subject. Let me look at let's look at a few passages here. Deuteronomy 6:5 says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, but the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't make decisions the way you do. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at a person's thoughts and intentions. Other translations, the Lord looks at the heart. Luke 12:34, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not depend on your own understanding. Psalms 119:11, I have hidden your word in my heart, that I might not sin against you. Proverbs 21:2, people may think they're doing what is right, but the Lord examines the heart. 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes of the Lord search the whole earth in order to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. What a fool you've been. From now on you will be at war. Matthew 15:8 says, those people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far away. See, according to Scriptures, the heart can be troubled, it can be wounded, it can be pierced, it can be grieved, it can even be broken. It can be whole or divided. It can be wise and foolish, steadfast, true, upright, stout, valiant. The heart can be wandering, it can be frightened, it can be faint, cowardly, it can melt like wax. Can be forgetful. Did everybody remember Valentine's Day? You don't have to admit it if you didn't. It can be dull. It can be stubborn, proud, wicked, perverse, hardened. And that's just a partial list of what Scripture says the heart can be.